I want to specifically address the need for a workplace justice to build up the social solidarity and democracy we need in our times, and how greater economic equality is necessary to resist far-right narratives, and that there's a positive view of globalisation which responds to the call for a universal love beyond borders, which is expressed by Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti and now by Pope Leo. Firstly then, work, social solidarity, democracy, I think they go together. But our working lives should be where we're given the chance to flourish, to give, to develop our abilities, and to be respected and valued by others, to participate in the common good, in short. But the modern workplace is too often a place of instrumentalisation, work intensification, and insecurity. Too often people are treated as units of production, whether they're on the shop floor or increasingly in professional work as well. People are working longer and harder for less. Mental health issues caused by stress at work are now the most common form of sick absence. Something is very wrong. The increase in insecurity, casualised work, the gig economy, full self-employment has been exacerbated since the introduction of austerity policies by the coalition government of 2010, with local government cuts focused on the areas of greater need. We were all in it together, was indeed doublespeak. Wasn't great before, but the growth in inequality and in work poverty has been exponential over the last 15 years. Now over half of those in poverty have jobs, and 2/3 of children in poverty are from a working household. Cost of living pressures, how people are treated at work, their experience of powerlessness and lack of agency, and the rundown of many working class communities is the motor for a wider alienation, and this is a reason for the current crisis in democracy. And it's not a crisis that can be dealt with bringing in PR or AV. The same alienation is present in countries with different voting systems. Something much deeper is needed. Vast numbers of working people do not see politics as for them, very similar to how Helen talked about it. Millions are not registered, millions don't vote. Overwhelmingly, those who don't are poorer. The biggest lie that those who already have power in our society tell working class people is politics is not for you. How convenient. Helen talked about the need for effective working class political representation, and it is absolutely vital for our democracy. We need to reassert that politics is what people at the grassroots do. That's people in workplaces, in communities, and in campaigning groups. What they do collectively to change society, that's politics. New employment rights to deal with low pay, insecure work are really important, and that's the aim of Labour's employment bill, which is the most important upgrade in workers' rights for a generation, but it's not enough. It's only the beginning, and we need to do a lot more on that in the coming years. Sort of vaguely asked to address this issue by an offline conversation, I wanted to just quickly, slightly go off piece to talk about the concept of DEI, which is Americanism actually. In Britain we talk about equality and diversity in politics. Laws that give greater rights to balance work with home and family life are necessary, very, very pertinent for the workplace we've got at the moment. And I would argue a caring society needs carers' rights. The UK has come late to improvements in maternity, paternity, parental and carers' leave. We are still much less generous than Scandinavia and many of the countries in Europe. Since the 1970s, our equality laws in the UK have aimed to make work fairer and society fairer, from the Race Relations Act onwards, Sex Discrimination Act. The attack, using the phrase DEI, is an attempt to roll back to a time when women, black and minority ethnic and disabled people were not in work in the numbers that they are now. The actually existing working class of 2025 is diverse. Just an example from my own union branch, 3,000 non-management grades in tech and telecom, and 44% of our membership is BME. I just asked this question, do we really want to go back to a time when disabled people were shut away and LGBT people lived in fear? I would say no. That's how I see it anyway. In the UK, economic liberalisation since the 1980s has destroyed much democratic accountability in our political economy. It's a lot of the destruction of our democracies come through an overreach in terms of the marketisation of society. You've got outsourcing, the use of a market model within public services, and the mass privatisation of the utilities. These, over several decades since the 1980s, have led to reductions in pay and terms and conditions, and have gone together with the undermining of the power of organised labour through explicitly anti-union laws. The macro effect of all of this is a shift of profits from labour to capital that's taken place, well documented by Piketty and others, a 10-point shift since the post-war period. So it's not people are actually getting it right when they think they've got less power, because that's actually the case. After 4 or more decades, we can see neoliberal policies have not led to greater efficiency or have any significant trickle-down effect. Often they've been the licence for corporate and individual greed. Speaking as a trade unionist in the private sector, I want to say a little bit about the regulatory system of privatised utilities, because that's really important, because utilities provide the essentials of life. But what we've seen is that the regulation is done more for the sake of the people who are in the companies dividing up the profits from privatisation, rather than actually ensuring long-term investment in those essential services, not maintaining decent labour standards, mass casualisation and down of standards, and certainly not the quality of service for customers, which surely should be the priorities of a regulator. The blunt instrument of price competition is subject to lobbying and legal action from companies in the market, with a revolving door from regulators to the boards. And when it goes hideously wrong, like in water, just one example, the water industry, the profits are privatised, taken away, and the debt is socialised, with the state, i.e. us as taxpayers, picking up the bill. So just to assert ownership matters, from water and energy to print, broadcast and social media, the power of the state to regulate and oversee essential services for the public is important. The neoliberal ideological consensus was against this, private good, public bad, but that is breaking down and we're at a new stage. There are no easy answers though, even though in a sense that model is being challenged. Popular attitudes on tax and social security have been affected by the dominance of market fundamentalism and the competitive individualism that it promotes. The failure to tax and call to account the tech-based behemoths led by Zuckerberg and Bezos, who are the robber barons of the fourth industrial revolution, is a case in point. And it's in this context that the populist framing of we're in a world of elites versus the people is really misleading and divisive. Take Trump. He maintains he's for the working man, and I use those words advisedly, the working man. But within 5 months, he's taken away union rights from 1 million US federal workers, sacked 250,000 of them, and is pushing through tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefit richer people while taking away the already minimal health and welfare provisions in the US. Here in the UK, Farage is pushing the same agenda when he cosplays being a working class supporter, as Paul Novak, General Secretary of the TUC, has astutely observed. While we're talking about Trump and Farage, friends of Vladimir Putin, I'll just put this out here as part of the discussion. Obviously, terrible news today about the Middle East, and that is really important and we need to pay attention to that. But we also need to pay attention to war in Europe now. The full-scale invasion by Russia of Ukraine in 2022 was preceded by the 2014 annexing of Crimea and Donbass, which followed on from deliberate destabilisation and conflict by Putin in Chechnya and Georgia. The undermining of democracy through hybrid war and electoral interference is intensifying, and we ignore it as our peril. I'd make a more sort of ideological point rather than comment on it anymore. Traditionalist ideas promoted by the ideologues Dugin in Russia and Bannon in the States are the philosophy of a multipolar world led by populist authoritarians who promote civilizational fascism. And it's in this context, I think, escalation of military conflict in Europe as well as the Middle East is a distinct possibility and a big worry. Just to finish on my last point about globalisation and universality. I hope I've got this right. I'm like Patrick, I'm really worried about always talking too long. I'd say the question about globalisation, which is addressed very much, the connection between the global and the local and universalised, is very much addressed by Fratelli Tutti. The question is not globalisation or nationalism, and I think Pope Francis makes that clear. It's what sort of globalisation. We have an interlinked world economic system, and it remains global, tariffs or no tariffs. Just think of the products and services you use every day, supply chains, multinational ownership. The immediate political challenges of the early 21st century, recognised in Laudate Si and Fratelli Tutti, require global coordination, international agreement, climate change, supporting diversity, biodiversity, environmental sustainability, reining in destructive corporate greed, and recognising the rights of refugees and migrants and the dignity of the poorest people on the planet. They're all need international action. They're also, interestingly, the priorities of the international trade union movement as well. It's also, I think, in Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis refers to a narcissistic localism which is not open to the universal. And I do believe that the post-liberal emphasis on the local, on place and community as a focus of action is, when counterposed to involvement in big politics, unhelpful. It's a product of a defeatist postmodernist view that capitalist hegemony and global injustices cannot be overcome. And it's a good job that not everyone thinks like that. We need to recognise the problems that exist in the world today, but also the potential of the particular phase of capitalism we are in. Never have we been more globally interconnected. The mass development of communications and transport technologies in the late 20th century, and now digital, big tech and AI, they can be goods. We know how they can end up not being goods, but they can be goods. We need to work for a better politics based on the vision of charity that is in Fratelli Tutti, an openness of love that is existential rather than geographic, existing within differentiated communities as well as across borders. Universal love in our tradition is based on the vision that we are all one, the mystical idea all is one, which is a very easy thing to say and a very hard thing to live. But at the end of Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis points to the example of Charles de Foucault, who spent his life with those who were poor and abandoned and came to be a universal brother by identifying with the least. So I think that's a good example.